Welcome to Cambridge House Live. I'm Bridgitte Anderson at the Canadian Investor Conference, Vancouver. And Keith Schaefer joins me now, the editor and publisher of Oil and Gas Investment Bulletin. It's very nice to see you again, Keith.
Thanks for having me, Bridgitte.
Let's start with an overview of Canadian energy stocks. You say that they're rebounding, and so give us an idea of the current state.
Sure, well, the last 4 months have just been fantastic. Really, at the end of January, everything took off, and that was because of the polar vortex, the very cold winter, raised gas prices, natural gas prices a lot more than everyone expected. So the stocks responded. As soon as the market understood that gas was going to have a huge demand over the rest of the winter, and we were going to end the season with a much lower inventory level than the last 5 years, these stocks took off. And so before the end of January, it was kind of a two-tier market. You had your leaders, but everybody else was just kind of really doing nothing. But at the end of January, everybody took off, and that stopped about 2-3 weeks ago, and we're kind of plateauing now, letting the charts catch up. But we haven't seen this kind of a good market since February 2011.
So what will drive that going forward? How much does the climate of the summer play into that?
Oh, huge. Because really we're seeing a continued increase in supply in gas in North America. So we're up about 5% this year, which equates to about 3 billion cubic feet a day. And so with that much extra supply and really no extra demand, that gas is all going into storage. So if we have a hot winter, or if we have a hot summer.
Sometimes winter, summer, they seem kind of the same.
If we have a hot summer, obviously you're not going to put as much gas into storage. And because inventories are so low, that'll help the gas price. But if we just have a normal summer, I'd see a bit of downside on gas prices here because supply has continued to increase so much.
Okay, let's talk, since we're talking about gas, I want to talk about BC's LNG sector because there has been so much focus on it. And there is a bit of a waiting period right now. There's a lot of companies that are out there in the field right now. How would you say things are shaping up? And how much of that is dependent on what the government's going to do on this tax regime?
You know, the tax regime in particular, I don't worry about that at all. I have no doubt that the industry and the government are going to come to a reasonable resolution. Right now, everybody's doing their positioning, they're negotiating, so the media grabs this headline and grabs that headline. But at the end of the day, this is going to get done. There's just way too much money for everybody on the line.
Well, although, you know, the head of Petronas was saying just recently that he was giving a bit of a warning to the government saying, you know, you better get this figured out and before the end of November. So you feel confident that's going to happen?
Yep.
Okay.
There's just way too much money on the table. This is going to happen. And there's a lot of naysayers out there that say, oh, you know, we're missing the boat, we're delaying. Not a chance. We are going to see LNG off the BC coast here this decade. Might not be quite as big as everyone expects, but the reality is that all the groups, the major groups that are doing this, they all have big Asian buyers built into them. So all these consortiums have either a Sinopec, a CNOOC, a Petronas, so they just want the gas. Economics aren't quite so important to them. They want the gas.
Do you think this deal between Russia and China, though, will have much of an impact on where BC's industry is going?
Too early to say, but I'd say not. You know, gas demand is growing. You know, plus all these countries want diversified sources of supply, and they love Canada being a very stable, law-abiding country. There's no history of prickly relations as there is with China and Russia. You know, Qatar's in the Middle East. That whole area is always a little bit on tender hooks. So they would welcome our source of stable supply.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about, we were speaking about it just before we had the cameras rolling, but the Argentinian shale play. So give us an update on what's going on there, because there's a lot of optimism.
Been a big renaissance there. You know, 2 years ago, the Argentine government nationalized the part of the play that belonged to Spain's national company. So they paid them off for $5 billion, took it back. But since then, a lot of the American majors have committed to some very big money, Chevron, Exxon. And so that's allowed the Canadian juniors now to rebound. And everything that we're seeing in that play says it's better than anything we've seen in North America. The leader in North America being the Bakken play in North Dakota and Saskatchewan. The Vaca Muerta in Argentina looks like it's 2 to 3 times more productive on a per well basis. So it's still early days there, but it looks like a great reservoir with a big aerial extent. And I guess as long as the government doesn't shoot themselves in the foot anymore, we're seeing a lot more industry activity there.
Are there any concerns around any kind of geopolitical tensions there, or is it pretty stable?
Well, geopolitical in terms of you never really know what that government's ever going to do. Argentina has been the mess of South America for decades, but the reality is it's in terms of economics, it works, the country needs it, and so it should move ahead.
And I'm going to move on to another one that we're going to focus on here, the Tuscaloosa marine shale.
Right, so that's in Louisiana,
yeah.
And it looks like that's going to be one of the last big new plays, oil plays in the States.
So what's the potential there?
Well, again, it's a band that stretches across the middle of the boot of Louisiana into Mississippi. There hasn't been a lot of wells yet, and Canada is one of the bigger players there. They've only drilled a few wells with their partner Goodrich, but right now it looks pretty exciting. The economics are looking like you're getting over 1,000 barrels a day on these flow rates to start, and so it's a pretty typical shale play that way. It really is. It's only had a few holes, so it's just too early to say. But right now, there's enough good news coming out of that play that people are starting to get excited. And of course, because it's in Louisiana where there's a lot of services, everything's cheaper there, so your threshold is a bit lower too.
Okay. Before I let you go, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about Northern Gateway or if we talked about Keystone. So what are you reading into where things are going? There's a lot of anticipation thinking that the Harper government is going to approve this and it's going to happen fairly soon. But doing the kind of research you do, what are you reading into this?
Well, at this stage, I don't know how much say the Harper government's going to have. They can approve it, but if you don't have your social license, you're going to have a problem.
And clearly, that is an issue, particularly around First Nations in some of the communities.
Absolutely. Personally, the way I kind of see this playing out is over a much longer timeline, where we're going to get gas pipelines done, and then you're going to see something like Gateway, probably not owned by Enbridge, maybe by somebody else. Piggyback on the right-of-way that the gas lines do, but that's a few more years delay. That's the way I see it happening. I hope I'm wrong, and I'm hoping that somebody can find a way to bring everybody together and make it work. But
there's certainly been a lot of delays south of the border on Keystone. The president has not been rushing to make a decision on that either.
He's caught in a political bind there between his political supporters and what he wants to do. So he's shown that he's a bit of a ditherer on that. And frankly, our industry has done an amazing job at getting crude by rail out. So it really hasn't impacted us near as much as we would have thought by now. But because our oil sands production continually is increasing, it will impact us a lot more in a couple of years if this doesn't get done.
Well, and it's a good reminder perhaps, whether we're talking about Keystone or we're talking about Gateway or we're talking about the LNG sector in British Columbia, that these take time to develop, and it's not a short-term play.
Well, the industry has had to completely relearn everything they know about how they operate, simply because all of a sudden a spotlight is on them that they've never, ever had before. They have basically had carte blanche to do almost whatever they wanted to for the last 50 years. And it's only been in the last 20, 25 years where they've really grabbed this environmental brass ring and tried to do things right, but they still get tarred with the old way that the resource industry did things.
Yeah.
And they haven't done a great job of anticipating getting in front of popular opinion on these things. They've kind of misjudged that, and they're still misjudging it. So they're playing catch up as opposed to getting in front of these issues, and that's going to hurt us for a while.
All right, well, thanks very much for the update, Keith. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Bridgitte.